Jake Morrison stepped off the transport shuttle and immediately walked face first into a holographic warning sign that read "Danger, lethal organisms beyond this point" in 17 different languages. The sign flickered through his head for a moment before he brushed it aside like a cobweb. "Oops," he said cheerfully, adjusting his human-issued protective gear that looked suspiciously like a beach outfit compared to the full-body armor everyone else was wearing. Commander Vex, a 7-foot-tall insectoid with compound eyes that currently displayed what could only be described as existential dread, scuttled forward on 6 legs. His mandibles clicked rapidly in what Jake's translation implant informed him was either nervous excitement or the alien equivalent of a panic attack. "Human Morrison," Vex's voice buzzed through the universal translator, "please tell me you have read the safety protocols. All 437 pages of them." Jake grinned and patted the datapad strapped to his belt. "Skimmed them on the shuttle. Pretty standard stuff, right? Don't pet the murder beasts. Don't lick anything glowing. Keep all limbs attached to your body where possible." Dr. Krill, a bird-like creature whose feathers were currently standing on end in what Jake assumed was either excitement or pure terror, fluttered closer. "Human Morrison, perhaps you misunderstood the nature of this assignment. The Galactic Zoological Research Station houses the most dangerous biological specimens in known space, creatures that have ended entire civilizations, organisms that exist purely to cause suffering and death." "Right," Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Sounds like fun. Where do I start?" Both aliens exchanged what would have been meaningful glances if either species had evolved anything resembling normal eyes. Commander Vex's compound eyes shifted through several colors that Jake's implant couldn't even translate. "Human Morrison," Vex said slowly, "when your species volunteered for this position, we assumed it was because humans possessed some form of advanced protective technology, or perhaps mystical powers, or at the very least, a basic survival instinct." "Nah," Jake said, already walking toward the containment facility while completely ignoring the biometric scanners, retinal locks, and DNA verification systems that were desperately trying to get his attention. "We just figured, hey, someone's got to study the scary space monsters, might as well be us. How dangerous could they really be?" Dr. Krill's feathers began molting in real time. "The Nexus Shadowmaw alone has a venom potent enough to kill a Dreadnought-class battleship. The Void Render can literally unmake reality in a 12-parsec radius. The Crimson Weaver feeds on the concept of hope itself." "Uh-huh," Jake replied, now somehow inside the facility despite having bypassed approximately 14 different security checkpoints. "And they need studying, right? Can't study them from way over there behind all that glass and force field stuff. Got to get up close, really see what makes them tick." Commander Vex was now making a sound that his species typically reserve for witnessing the heat death of the universe. Human Morrison, the previous xenobiologist, was a Korthan battle sage who had survived the plasma wars of Andromedas. He took one look at the Shadowmaw and requested immediate transfer to a nice safe job defusing quantum bombs. "Huh?" Jake said, peering through the transparent aluminum walls at something that looked like it had been designed by a committee of nightmares. "What happened to him?" "He is now a meditation instructor on a peaceful agricultural world," Dr. Krill whispered. "He grows flowers and teaches younglings about inner peace. He has never been happier." Jake shrugged. "Well, that's nice for him. So which one of these beauties am I meeting first?" "The Nexus Shadowmaw," Commander Vex said in the tone typically reserved for announcing galactic apocalypses, "is housed in Containment Unit 7. It is a level Omega threat with adaptive camouflage, reality phasing capabilities, and venom that can theoretically kill abstract concepts." Jake whistled appreciatively. "Sounds like a real character. Lead the way." The walk to Containment Unit 7 involved passing through 17 different airlocks, each one accompanied by increasingly frantic warnings that Jake ignored with the dedication of a man who had never met a safety regulation he couldn't casually disregard. "Dr. Krill was now shedding feathers at a rate that suggested he might be completely bald before they reached their destination. "The viewing platform is equipped with Class A shielding," Vex explained as they approached what looked like a small moon made entirely of warning labels. "You will observe from behind quantum-reinforced barriers, while we monitor the creature's behavioral patterns." "Right," Jake said, somehow already standing next to the containment field with his nose practically pressed against the energy barrier. "Where is it?" "I don't see anything." That was when the nothing he was looking at opened approximately 47 eyes. The Nexus Shadowmaw materialized like a fever dream having a bad day. It was roughly the size of a small building, covered in what appeared to be living darkness that occasionally sprouted teeth, and possessed more tentacles than seemed mathematically possible. Its eyes were the color of dying stars, and when it moved, reality seemed to hiccup slightly. "Beautiful," Jake breathed, leaning closer to the containment field. Look at those adaptive camouflage patterns. And the biomechanical structure is just incredible. Human Morrison, Dr. Krill squawked. Please step back from the containment barrier. The creature is clearly agitated by your presence. Indeed, the Shadow Maw was making sounds that the translation software was rendering as various creative ways to describe the ending of existence. It began flowing toward Jake with movements that hurt to look at directly. It's just curious, Jake said, reaching out to touch the containment field. See how it's approaching? Classic investigative behavior. Do not touch the containment field, Vex commanded. Jake touched the containment field. The barrier flickered. For exactly 1.3 seconds, there was nothing between Jake and a creature that had once eaten a small moon just to see how it tasted. The Shadow Maw struck faster than light could be bothered to travel. One moment Jake was standing there with his hand on the failed barrier. The next moment he had several feet of otherworldly tentacle wrapped around his arm, with fangs the size of fence posts buried deep in his shoulder. Commander Vex immediately activated every emergency protocol the station possessed. Alarms began screaming in frequencies that most species couldn't even hear. Dr. Krill started preparing last rites in 4 different religious traditions simultaneously. The Shadow Maw pumped enough venom into Jake to kill a small armada. Its eyes glowed with satisfaction as it waited for its victim to dissolve into constituent atoms or possibly transform into something that had never existed in the first place. Jake looked down at the massive creature attached to his arm, blinked a few times, and then scratched at the bite marks with his free hand. Huh, he said, conversationally. That's a little tingly, like a mosquito with an attitude problem. The Shadow Maw's eyes began blinking in what could only be described as confusion. It had never encountered prey that responded to its apocalyptic venom with mild irritation. Could someone get this guy off me? Jake asked, giving the creature a gentle pat on what might have been its head. I think he's stuck. Dr. Krill fainted. Commander Vex began making the sound his species reserve for witnessing impossible things. And Jake Morrison, with several gallons of reality-ending venom coursing through his system, wondered if anyone knew where the cafeteria was because all this excitement was making him hungry. 3 hours later, Jake was sitting in the medical bay while Dr. Krill ran every diagnostic test known to galactic science plus a few he was making up on the spot. The results were coming back as either perfectly normal or error. Please recalibrate your equipment and question your life choices. This is impossible, Dr. Krill muttered, staring at readings that suggested Jake's blood was somehow more healthy after being injected with universe-ending toxins. The venom should have dissolved your molecular structure. At minimum, you should be experiencing complete cellular breakdown. Jake stretched and yawned. I feel great, actually. Little sleepy, but that might be because someone's been poking me with science gadgets for 3 hours. He paused thoughtfully. The bite site does itch a bit. Got any of that blue cream stuff? Commander Vex was in the corner rapidly updating his incident reports. He was currently on report number 47 and had started making up new categories of impossibility to file them under. Human Morrison, Vex said without looking up from his datapad, we are going to need to run additional tests. Perhaps you could observe some of our other specimens while we prepare the equipment. Sounds good, Jake said, hopping off the medical bed. What's next on the tour? What happened next would later be referred to in galactic academic circles as the Morrison Cascade, or that time physics gave up and went home. The Acid Weaver, a creature that could dissolve matter at the atomic level, somehow managed to spit directly into Jake's face during what was supposed to be a routine observation. Jake wiped it off with his shirt and complained that it tasted like bad lemonade. The Acid Weaver spent the next hour in what appeared to be an existential crisis. The Mind Melter, a psychic horror that fed on sanity itself, attempted to devour Jake's consciousness and immediately began experiencing what Dr. Krill could only describe as psychological indigestion. Jake rated the experience as weird but not unpleasant, like having someone rearrange your sock drawer while you're wearing the socks. The probability worm, which existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and could rewrite cause and effect, tried to erase Jake from the timeline. Jake flickered out of existence for approximately 0.3 seconds, then reappeared looking mildly confused. Did something just happen? He asked. I felt like I forgot something, but then I remembered I never remember anything anyway, so I think we're good. The probability worm began making sounds that violated several laws of physics and at least one law of common decency. By the time they reached the Crimson Weaver, which fed on hope and optimism, Dr. Krill was taking notes so frantically that he had worn through 3 datapads. Commander Vex had given up on incident reports and was now just documenting everything as humans are either the universe's greatest miracle or its most elaborate practical joke. The Crimson Weaver, a beautiful and terrible creature that looked like a spider made of living sunset, immediately began attempting to drain Jake of all positive emotions. It latched onto his psyche and began feeding. Jake stood there for a moment, looking thoughtful. "You know," he said conversationally, "I was having a pretty good day before this and somehow I'm having an even better day now. Is this thing supposed to be doing something?" The Crimson Weaver made a sound like a cosmic stomachache and promptly began glowing with more hope and optimism than it had ever contained. It started weaving webs that spelled out inspirational messages in 17 different languages. "I think you broke it," Dr. Krill whispered. Jake shrugged. "Or I fixed it. Hard to tell with alien space monsters. They're all so dramatic." He looked around at the various creatures they had visited, all of whom were now staring at him with expressions ranging from confusion to what might have been respect. "So," Jake said, clapping his hands together, "what's for lunch? All this not dying has worked up quite an appetite." Commander Vex looked at his datapad, then at Jake, then at the various reality-ending creatures that were now behaving like confused pets, then back at his datapad. "I need to make some calls," Vex said quietly. "Very important calls. To people who are much smarter than me and hopefully have some idea what we're dealing with." Jake nodded agreeably. "Cool. Mind if I grab a sandwich while you're doing that? And maybe see if anyone has a deck of cards. I bet some of these creatures would be up for a friendly game of poker." Professor Glim arrived 6 hours later in a state of what could only be described as academic excitement mixed with existential terror. The ancient Zephyrian scholar had spent the better part of 3 centuries studying xenobiology, and his crystalline body was currently flickering through colors that indicated either profound curiosity or a complete nervous breakdown. "Show me the human," Glim said without preamble, his voice resonating like wind chimes in a hurricane. Commander Vex led him to the observation deck, where Jake was currently engaged in what appeared to be a friendly conversation with the Nexus Shadow Maw. The creature of living nightmare was somehow nodding along while Jake explained the rules of Texas Hold'em. "You see," Jake was saying, "the trick is reading your opponent's tells. Like right now when your reality-bending tentacles start twitching, I know you're bluffing." The Shadow Maw made a sound that the translation software rendered as "how did you know?" Professor Glim's crystalline structure began resonating at frequencies that made nearby equipment malfunction. "Impossible," he whispered. "The creature is communicating, socially engaging. The Nexus Shadow Maw hasn't spoken to another being in over 4,000 years. Human Morrison has been teaching it card games," Dr. Krill reported, his voice hollow with shock. "The creature appears to be enjoying itself." "This cannot be," Glim said, pulling up holographic displays that showed Jake's biological readings alongside comparative data from thousands of known species. "Let me examine the human's physiology more closely." What Professor Glim discovered over the next several hours would fundamentally reshape galactic understanding of evolutionary biology. "Observe," Glim said, projecting Jake's genetic structure into 3-dimensional space. "Human DNA contains what they call junk genes missequences that appear to serve no purpose. Except they are not junk at all, they are adaptations." Commander Vex leaned closer, his compound eyes shifting through spectrums of disbelief. "Adaptations to what?" "To everything," Glim replied, highlighting sections of genetic code that pulsed with soft light. "Humans evolved on a planet that spent millions of years actively trying to kill them. Ice ages that lasted millennia. Volcanic super eruptions that blocked out their sun. Asteroid impacts that would sterilize most worlds. Plagues that should have ended their species dozens of times over." Dr. Krill's feathers were now standing completely on end. "How did they survive?" "They didn't just survive," Glim continued, his excitement building. "They thrived. Each extinction-level event made them stronger. Their immune systems learned to treat planetary disasters as minor inconveniences. Their psychological structures adapted to find hope in hopelessness, humor in horror, and curiosity in catastrophe." The professor pulled up comparative evolutionary charts. "Most species develop specialized defenses against specific threats. Humans developed a generalized defense against the concept of threat itself. They became immune to impossibility." "That's ridiculous," Commander Vex protested. "No species can be immune to impossibility." "Can't they?" Glim asked, gesturing toward the containment area where Jake was now apparently teaching the Acid Weaver how to play chess. The creature was using its molecular dissolving secretions to carve pieces out of pure energy, while Jake provided helpful commentary on strategy. "Consider their cultural development," Glim continued. "When faced with creatures that eat fear, humans invented horror movies for entertainment. When confronted with the concept of meaninglessness, they created philosophy and art. When told something was impossible, they made it a challenge." Dr. Krill was frantically taking notes. But the venom, the psychic attacks, the reality manipulation. How do they resist all of it? They don't resist it, Glim explained. They incorporate it. Human biology doesn't fight foreign influences. It adapts to them, learns from them, and somehow makes them part of its normal operating parameters. The Shadow Maw's venom didn't poison human Morrison, it became part of his biochemistry. The mind melter didn't destroy his sanity. It gave him new perspectives on consciousness. Professor Glim paused his presentation as they watched Jake high-five the probability worm, which had apparently just learned how to exist in only 3 dimensions at once. There's more, Glim said quietly. Human Morrison's presence is having a secondary effect. These creatures have been imprisoned here for decades, centuries in some cases. They've been going insane from isolation and purposelessness. But now, they looked through the observation windows. The Crimson Weaver was humming what sounded suspiciously like a human pop song while weaving increasingly cheerful patterns. The Mind Melter was engaged in what appeared to be a philosophical discussion with the Acid Weaver about the nature of existence. The Nexus Shadow Maw was practicing card tricks. Now they're socializing, Commander Vex said in wonder. They're happy, humans. Professor Glim concluded, are not just immune to cosmic horror, they're cosmic horror rehabilitation specialists. They don't conquer the darkness. They invite it over for dinner and teach it to play board games. As if to emphasize the point, Jake's voice carried over the intercom. Hey, does anyone know if we have any pizza? The Void Render says it's never tried cheese before, and I think we're having a breakthrough here. The mention of the Void Render caused every being in the observation deck to freeze in terror. Professor Glim's crystalline body went completely transparent, which was the Zephyrian equivalent of fainting while remaining conscious. Commander Vex's mandibles began clicking so rapidly they sounded like a malfunctioning data processor. The Void Render, Dr. Krill whispered, his voice barely audible. He's talking to the Void Render. The Void Render was housed in the station's maximum security containment system, a facility so heavily shielded that it existed partially outside normal spacetime. It was the station's most dangerous specimen, a creature of pure entropy that had once consumed an entire star system by simply existing too enthusiastically in its general vicinity. We need to evacuate the station, Commander Vex said, his voice cracking through several octaves of panic. If the containment has been breached, wait, Professor Glim interrupted, his transparency flickering back to solidity as scientific curiosity overrode self-preservation. Listen, they activated the maximum security monitoring system, breaking approximately 47 different safety protocols in the process. What they heard changed their understanding of cosmic horror forever. So you're telling me, Jake's voice came through with perfect clarity, that you don't actually want to unmake reality. You're just really bored. The response came in a voice like the sound of galaxies dying, but somehow it managed to convey the cosmic equivalent of a sheepish admission. It has been 17,000 years since anyone attempted conversation. The unmaking of existence seemed preferable to continued isolation. Man, that's rough, Jake replied with genuine sympathy. 17,000 years alone. No wonder you're cranky. I get grumpy after like 3 hours without human contact. Through the security feeds, they could see Jake sitting cross-legged in front of a containment field that was definitely, absolutely, 100% not supposed to be turned off. Beyond the deactivated barrier was something that hurt to look at directly, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to exist in too many dimensions simultaneously. The fascinating aspect, the Void Render continued, its reality-ending voice, somehow managing to convey conversational enthusiasm, is that your species approaches the incomprehensible without fear. Most beings encounter me and immediately begin screaming about the heat death of the universe. Well, yeah, Jake said, unwrapping what appeared to be a sandwich. But like the universe is going to end eventually anyway, right? Might as well make friends while we're here. He took a bite and continued talking with his mouth full. Want some? It's peanut butter and jelly. Classic Earth combination. I consume the fundamental forces of reality, the Void Render said uncertainly. Right, but have you tried peanut butter? There was a pause that seemed to last several geological ages. Then, very carefully, a tendril of living darkness extended toward Jake's sandwich. In the observation deck, Dr. Krill was hyperventilating so rapidly that his feathers were creating their own weather system. It's going to devour him. It's going to devour the sandwich. It's going to devour the concept of sandwiches. But instead of cosmic annihilation, what happened was somehow even more impossible. The Void Render's tendril touched the sandwich, and for the first time in its existence, it experienced flavor. This is, the creature paused, its voice filled with wonder. This is, pleasant. The combination of proteins and sugars creates a sensation that is enjoyable. Right? Jake grinned. Earth food is pretty great. We've got like, thousands of different combinations. You should try pizza sometime. Or ice cream. Oh man, you'd love ice cream. Professor Glim was now documenting everything with the fervor of someone witnessing the birth of a new branch of science. Incredible. The human is teaching a creature of pure entropy to appreciate gustatory experiences. He's giving it reasons to exist beyond destruction. The conversation continued for hours. Jake, with the patience of someone who had clearly never met a problem he couldn't solve with casual conversation and shared snacks, listened to 17,000 years of cosmic loneliness. He offered suggestions about hobbies the Void Render might enjoy, explained human concepts like friendship and purpose, and somehow managed to convince a manifestation of universal entropy that existence was actually pretty interesting when you had someone to share it with. You know what your problem is? Jake said eventually, finishing his third sandwich. You need a job. Something that uses your talents but isn't ending all of existence. I am a force of pure destructive entropy, the Void Render pointed out. My nature is antithetical to creation and order. So, humans are naturally selfish and violent, but we invented charity and peace treaties. Nature's just your starting point, not your destination. Jake stood up and stretched. Besides, I bet there's tons of stuff in the universe that needs some controlled unmaking. Like, I don't know, space garbage, failed experiments, really bad poetry. The Void Render considered this. I had not considered the concept of selective entropy application. See, you just needed a new perspective. Jake clapped his hands together. So, want to meet the other guys? I think you'd get along great with the Shadow Maw. It's been working on some really impressive reality phasing techniques. As Jake led the Void Render toward the other containment areas, chatting away like he was introducing old friends at a dinner party, the observation deck remained in stunned silence. He did it, Dr. Krill whispered. He actually did it. He befriended the literal embodiment of cosmic destruction. More than that, Professor Glim said, his voice filled with academic awe. He gave it hope, purpose, a reason to choose creation over entropy. Commander Vex looked at his incident reports, then at the security feeds, showing Jake organizing what appeared to be the universe's most dangerous social mixer, then back at his reports. I'm going to need a bigger filing system, he said quietly. 6 months later, the Galactic Zoological Research Station had undergone what the official reports diplomatically referred to as a complete paradigm shift in specimen management protocols. What had actually happened was that Jake Morrison had accidentally revolutionized the entire field of cosmic horror relations by treating universe-ending entities like slightly antisocial coworkers who just needed better management. The transformation had been remarkable. The Nexus Shadow Maw, once a creature of pure malevolent darkness, now served as the station's head of security. Its ability to phase through reality made it incredibly effective at preventing actual security breaches, and its 47 eyes meant nothing got past it. Plus, it had developed an unexpected talent for origami, creating beautiful paper sculptures that only occasionally violated the laws of physics. The Mind Melter had discovered a passion for psychology, and was now the station's unofficial therapist. Its ability to literally understand the deepest thoughts and fears of other beings made it remarkably good at helping creatures work through their issues. It had started a support group for reformed cosmic horrors called Entities Anonymous, and attendance was surprisingly good. The Acid Weaver had become the station's head of maintenance, using its molecular dissolving abilities to clean equipment with unprecedented precision. It had also developed what could only be described as an artistic streak, creating elaborate sculptures from dissolved matter that were somehow both beautiful and only mildly reality-threatening. The probability worm now worked in the statistics department, where its ability to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously made it incredibly efficient at data analysis. It had successfully predicted 17 different budget shortfalls, and had somehow managed to requisition equipment that didn't technically exist yet, but would be invented next Tuesday. The Crimson Weaver had started a craft workshop, teaching other entities how to weave hope and inspiration into physical form. Its creations were so uplifting that they had to be stored in special containment, because prolonged exposure caused spontaneous outbreaks of optimism and productivity throughout the station. And the Void Render. The Void Render had found its calling as the galaxy's first and only selective entropy specialist. It now traveled throughout known space, carefully unmaking things that needed unmaking mid-space debris, failed experiments, corrupt government bureaucracies, and really terrible holographic entertainment programs. It had become so popular that there was a 6-month waiting list for its services. The efficiency reports are unprecedented. Commander Vex reported during the monthly staff meeting, his compound eyes actually displaying something that might have been satisfaction. Productivity is up 400%, morale is at levels we previously thought were mathematically impossible, and we haven't had a single containment breach since Human Morrison implemented his friendship protocols. Jake, who now held the official title of Director of Aggressive Species Relations, was sitting at the head of the conference table with his feet up, sharing a bag of potato chips with what appeared to be a small tornado made of crystallized screaming. The entity was new to the station and something they discovered last week that existed purely to cause existential dread. But Jake had already gotten it interested in meteorology. It's really not that complicated, Jake said, offering the Dread Vortex another chip. Most of these guys just needed someone to talk to, and something productive to do with their time. Amazing what a little job satisfaction can accomplish. Dr. Krill, who had somehow managed to regrow all his feathers despite the constant state of low-level panic that was now his natural condition, nodded enthusiastically. The psychological profiles show remarkable improvement across all specimens. Even the entities that feed on negative emotions have found ways to channel their abilities constructively. Speaking of which, Jake continued. I've been thinking we should expand the program. There are probably thousands of dangerous cosmic entities out there who are just bored and misunderstood. We could set up a whole network, like a cosmic rehabilitation and job placement service. Professor Glim, who had been documenting Jake's methods for the past 6 months, flickered through colors of excitement. The applications are limitless. We could revolutionize interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. Imagine instead of containing cosmic horrors, we could be integrating them into galactic society. Exactly, Jake said, grinning. I mean, the Void Render alone has eliminated more bureaucratic inefficiency in 6 months than most governments manage in centuries. And the Shadow Maw's security protocols have reduced station break-ins to literally zero. Commander Vex consulted his datapad. Speaking of expansion, we've received 17 requests from other research stations asking for consultation on their own problematic specimens, and the Galactic Council has expressed interest in establishing similar programs on 12 other worlds. Cool, Jake said, tossing another chip to the Dread Vortex, which caught it with a tendril of crystallized despair and somehow managed to convey gratitude. We'll need to hire more staff though. Maybe some of the entities would be interested in training positions. The Mind Melter's really good at explaining complex concepts, and the Probability Worm has some great insights into risk assessment. As if summoned by the mention of its name, the Probability Worm materialized partially through the conference room wall, existing in just enough dimensions to participate in the conversation without giving everyone headaches. I have run the calculations, it announced in its voice, like statistics having an argument. The probability of this program's success across multiple installations is 94.7%, with a margin of error of plus or minus the heat death of 3 small universes. Those are pretty good odds, Jake said approvingly. What's the remaining 5.3%? The possibility that we accidentally create a utopian galactic civilization where cosmic horrors and ordinary beings coexist in perfect harmony, thereby fundamentally altering the nature of existence itself. Jake considered this for a moment. And that's a bad thing because the Probability Worm paused, existing across several dimensions of confusion. I had not considered that it might not be bad. I was operating under the assumption that fundamentally altering existence was inherently problematic. Nah, Jake said, finishing the last chip and crumpling up the bag. Change is good. Keeps things interesting. 3 hours later, as the meeting wound down and various cosmic entities returned to their productive, fulfilling jobs, Commander Vex found himself standing in the observation deck, looking out at what had once been the most dangerous facility in known space, and was now, improbably, one of the happiest. Dr. Krill joined him, carrying a steaming cup of something that smelled like contentment mixed with mild anxiety. You know, Dr. Krill said thoughtfully, when Human Morrison first arrived, I was certain he was going to die within the first hour. We all were. Vex replied. Instead he accomplished something that our greatest minds thought was impossible. What's that? Commander Vex watched through the transparent aluminum as Jake organized an impromptu volleyball game between the Acid Weaver and the Shadow Maw, with the Void Render keeping score by selectively unmaking points from reality and then putting them back. He proved that the universe's greatest threats aren't actually threatening at all, Vex said quietly. They're just lonely, bored, and in need of a good friend and a decent job. Dr. Krill nodded, sipping his anxiety beverage. Think it'll work on the next batch of cosmic horrors they bring in. Knowing Human Morrison, Vex replied, watching Jake high-five a creature made of pure mathematical impossibility. I'd say the odds are pretty good. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Commander Vex found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, The rest of the galaxy was about to discover what the research station had learned, that humans weren't just immune to cosmic horror, they were cosmic horror's best friends.